Good morning, everyone. This is Lana Hunt, Director of Communications and Professional Development with IPMG, and welcome to our final informational webinar of 2023. Today, we're going to be learning some information to help us identify, manage, and build our resilience to stress. And today's presentation is being presented by Laura Dieter, who is the Registered Nurse Consultant with IPMG. Before I introduce Laura, I would just like to go over a few things related to today's webinar. It will be recorded, and the recording and the associated materials, I know that Laura has a handout that we're going to share, will be available on IPMG's website in the resources section under informational webinars within a couple of days. So if you would like to go back and reference anything, you will be able to do that on our website. We will also have a survey that will be administered at the close of today's webinar that we would really encourage you to answer. It does help us in preparing the topics for the upcoming webinars that we will be hosting in 2023. And finally, all attendees of today's webinar, if you are logged in using the link that was provided to you to log in, will receive an email following today's webinar that will confirm your attendance and will also contain a certificate of attendance. And if you didn't do the survey when the webinar closes today, there will be a link in that email to complete the survey if you would like to do that. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Laura Dieter. And Laura has worked in the nursing field for almost 20 years, first working as a nursing assistant and then graduating to become a nurse in 2005. She has experience in medical, surgical, cardiac critical care, emergency room, and primary care nursing, as well as hospital administration. Laura has worked with IPMG as our nurse consultant for 5 years, and she consults with case managers, care managers, and our wraparound facilitators. Laura also assists in facilitating IPMG's health and wellness program for IPMG employee owners. And as part of IPMG, Laura works very hard to educate and advocate for a healthy lifestyle and assist both IPMG employee owners and the individuals IPMG is privileged to serve. Laura lives in Lafayette, Indiana with her 2 sons and her husband, and when she isn't working for IPMG, she can be found with her family or in her studio where she is a comprehensive Pilates instructor. So it is my pleasure now to turn the presentation over to Laura, and I am going to do that right now. Laura.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Can you guys see my screen? Is everybody good here?
We are good. Yes. Thank you.
All right. Well, we will jump in then. Like Lana said, we are going to talk about stress today. Let me get my computer moving here. So our learning objectives today is that by the end of the presentation, you should be able to define stress and describe the effects it can have on the body. You should also be able to interpret the signs of stress in yourself and others and identify ways to help. And you should be able to discuss the difference between stress resilience versus stress reduction. So what is stress? The clinical definition is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from very adverse or very demanding circumstances. Basically, it's how we react when we feel under pressure or threatened, whether these are real or perceived. Usually happens when we're in a situation that we don't feel that we can manage or that we don't have a lot of control over. I would guess we all know what stress is and how it feels. It's just kind of the process of living, right? I don't think you can separate life and stress completely because the very process of living is stressful. We have work, we have kids, marriage, relationships, friendships, family, and on and on and on. And a lot of our stress comes from these competing demands. Work-life balance. A lot of us are now part of that sandwich generation where we're raising kids and taking care of our aging parents, maybe even our aging grandparents. So all of these things are competing for our time, attention, and energy, and can make us feel overwhelmed and stressed. And it's important to note that not all stress is bad, right? Stress in and of itself is not a bad thing. The stress response is built into our body to protect us when we are under threats. So it helps us stay alert. It helps us plan and be prepared in certain situations. The biggest problem we run into is when we don't manage our levels of stress, because there is no cap to the amount of stress that we feel. Unfortunately, there is, it can just keep snowballing day after day and compounding. I wish there was a threshold that you could reach and be like, well, I've reached my threshold. I can't feel any more stress. But it's that building up of stress day after day that really can have a huge consequence to our overall health, both mental and physical health. In fact, high levels of perceived stress are linked to higher early mortality rates. Young men were 2.6 times more likely to have early mortality with high levels of stress. And this statistic I thought was staggering. Caregivers are 63% more likely to have an early mortality rate and a 23% increased risk of stroke. So you can see how that might affect the families that you care for, the individuals and those that care for them as well. And we know that stress isn't just in our heads. It affects our brains, our bodies, down even to our cellular level. And according to the Stress in America survey, 42% of adults in the United States say their stress levels have increased over the past 5 years. And I would guess if we retook that survey coming out of a global pandemic, a contentious election cycle, I would guess those rates are probably a little bit higher now. And teens are reporting stress levels that rivaling of adults. So it's clearly something we need to talk about, we need to address within ourselves and with those that we're working with as well. So there are two types of stress. We have acute stress and chronic stress. Acute stress is what I'm currently feeling giving this presentation. It usually happens within a few minutes to a few hours of an event. It lasts for a short period of time, usually less than a few weeks, and can feel very, very intense. And again, this isn't all bad things, but examples are, speaking in public, car accidents, skiing for the first time, flying, all of these can cause a stress response in our body. And then we have chronic stress. Chronic stress lasts for a long period of time, keeps coming back. You might experience this if you're under a lot of pressure a lot of time, or your day-to-day life is difficult. Examples of this might be a lower socioeconomic status, job strain or overload, relationship problems, chronic illness, loss of a loved one, or being a caregiver like we talked about. So when we experience stress, we can experience it at different levels. We can experience it as an individual. So you're working in a stressful job, you're case managers, maybe you're in management, so you can experience that as an individual. You can also experience stress as part of a group. Maybe your family's going through a difficult time, maybe you've lost a loved one, or you're going through a financial hard time, so you can experience that as a group stress. You can also experience it as part of a community. You might belong to an ethnic group that's experiencing discrimination. Your community might have suffered a loss, so you can experience it on a community level as well. And then finally, as a member of society, I think one of a great example of this is the pandemic that we just kind of came out of it. We as a collective whole felt that stress as a society. And it's important to note this isn't an either or situation. It's not that you can feel stress as an individual or as a group. It's kind of an and or. In fact, you could probably go through right now and write down how you're feeling stress in each one of these different categories. So we can feel it in all of these different ways. And then the fight or flight response. So when we're triggered, our body kicks into this fight or flight response. I'm sure everybody's aware of this. One thing I want to note is that the fight or flight response and the hormones that it releases affects all of our major systems in the body. The musculoskeletal, respiratory, cardiovascular, endocrine, gastrointestinal, nervous system, reproductive system, it all gets affected by these hormones. And that's important to keep in mind when we go into talking about chronic stress and why that is so harmful. But When we get activated, when we're in this fight or flight response, our sympathetic nervous system responds by flooding the body with, excuse me, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. And these effects can be felt immediately. So your pulse starts to rise, your respiration you start increasing your respirations, and that's all to get more oxygen into your body. Your blood pressure goes up, and that extra oxygen is sent to the brain to increase alertness. Your sight, hearing, and other senses become sharper. Your blood sugar and fats from energy stores are released into the bloodstream to give you extra power, give you extra energy. Your skin temperature goes up, your palms start sweating, digestion is slowed down. All of your energy is basically being conserved to stay alive because your body, again, is in this reaction where it feels threatened, right? And all of these changes happen so quickly that you're probably not even aware of it. In fact, your brain's wiring is so efficient that it starts this cascade even before the brain's visual centers have had a chance to fully process what's happening. It's how you hear of stories of people jumping out of the path of an oncoming car before they ever realize what they're doing. And while it can take just a split second for your body to react, it can take up to 20 to 60 minutes or longer, depending on how long you were in that response, for your body to kind of recalibrate back to normal. And one thing to note, your body's going to react to these stressors, whether they are real or perceived, and can't really differentiate between a life-threatening event or one that just feels like a life-threatening event. So you're going to have the same response either way. And then we're going to talk about chronic stress. So some common symptoms of chronic stress is irritability, anxiety, headaches, insomnia, and depression. Remember, that fight or flight response is designed to protect our body. So we've got those hormones running through our system. And when we keep firing that same system, your body never really has time to recalibrate back to normal. So we get that irritability and anxiety. You've got epinephrine running through your body, which makes you feel kind of preparing you to fight, basically. So you're in this charged up state. So it makes sense that you're going to feel edgy, anxious, grouchy when that hormone keeps running through your body. And this is just an interesting side note. Your brains and your guts are really highly connected. So your gut's filled with millions of bacteria, and it's in constant communication with your brain, which is why you can feel butterflies or feel nauseous when you get nervous or anxious, because your brain and gut are communicating. And it's interesting that chronic stress, actually changes our gut bacteria, which has a major impact on our ability to think and affects our emotions. Headaches and overall fatigue are another symptom of chronic stress. Again, your muscles are tight, again, preparing to fight or flee. We hold a lot of tension in our bodies when we're stressed. We also get kicked into this shallow breathing pattern where we're using the muscles of our chest, our neck, our shoulders to kind of draw that breath in. And because we're so tight, that leads to a lot of, especially tension headaches when we're under a lot of chronic stress. Insomnia, I'm going to talk more about this later, but stress definitely affects our quality and quantity of sleep. And then chronic stress also is linked to higher rates of depression. And there's a few factors that make some more prone to depression. And one of that is the types of stress that you're under, interpersonal loss or loss of a loved one, and rejection, like divorce, makes you at a higher risk for depression. The timing of stress, so early childhood events have a stronger link to depression later in life. So the higher the adverse childhood experience scale, the higher risk of depression. And then genetics. Scientists have located what they call the depression gene. You have two of them. It's either short or long. You can have one or the other. And two short genes, and you have much a higher risk of depression than someone with two longs. Now, obviously, we're not going to know that unless we undergo genetic testing, which most of us are not going to. But it's just important to note that some individuals have a genetic link to depression. Some other long-term effects, and I'm not going to read through all of these, but again, keeping in mind that stress affects all of our major organs, we can have a lot of long-term health consequences when we stay in this chronic stress situation. Adrenal fatigue, insufficiency, increased risk of diabetes, thyroid problems. You're at an increased risk for heart attack and stroke because it affects our heart so much. exacerbation of asthma or COPD, respiratory issues, constipation, diarrhea, mental fog from that brain-gut connection, overall fatigue, we talked about that, exhaustion, body aches. You're much more susceptible to viral illnesses like colds, the flu, and COVID. And you also tend to have a longer recovery time because your body is already trying to deal with these hormones, and then you add another stressor to it, and it just takes a lot longer to recover. And I mentioned earlier that stress affects us down to our cellular level. And I kind of geeked out on the slide because I thought it's super fascinating. You guys probably don't care, so I'll keep this short. But stress alters our DNA and basically ages us. It quickens or increases the aging process and brings along the associated health risks. You can kind of read why it does that, but I just thought it was really interesting that it changes our DNA to make us age faster. And what I really found interesting is that this process can begin even before birth. Studies show that mothers with reported high levels of stress had babies with shorter telomere lengths, which means they'll age quicker. So you could see how this could be a generational thing and how that might affect children down the road, their children. So just something interesting to note, that stress actually alters our DNA. It also alters how we live on a day-to-day basis. When we are stressed and overwhelmed, we tend to fall out of our good habits and pick up a lot of bad habits. Our energy is low. We're probably not sleeping as well. A lot of people tend to stress eat when they are overwhelmed. And there's actually a scientific reason why we do this. Again, I find it fascinating. So there's three parts of our brain. We've got the limbic brain, which is our emotional brain. We have the prefrontal cortex, which helps us regulate and think clearly. That's where we get our self-control. And then we have the reward center, which is where our dopamine is housed, and that just makes us feel good. So when we're stressed, I'm going to stick with stress eating, but you could substitute this for Netflix binging, retail therapy, smoking, drinking, any bad habits that you have or that you tend to lean towards when you are overwhelmed. But I'm going to stick with stress eating and junk food because I have a point to make about that. But so when we're stressed, our limbic brain is activated. So our emotional brain is highly active and our prefrontal cortex shuts down. So that part that helps us think clearly and regulate, that part's shut down. So you can see how this could start a really vicious cycle. So we're stressed and our body craves calm because it doesn't want to feel anxious. You know, we all want that calm feeling. So we reach for that junk food or that comfort food, that high carb, high fat food that just makes us feel good. That lights up our reward center. Dopamine is released. Our body feels calm. The problem is dopamine doesn't last very long. So we then crash and then we start this cycle all over again. The problem with how we eat when we're stressed is because we have cortisol running through our body, and cortisol makes us gain weight differently than when we don't have it running through our body. So cortisol makes us gain weight around our middle, that midsection, kind of that tire around our waist. That is called visceral fat, and that visceral fat puts us at an increased risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and in women, a higher risk for breast cancer. So you can see how stress is just one aspect, and all of these different things kind of fall under this umbrella that also have their associated health risks. So again, it's really important to identify and recognize that stress, which leads us right into talking about recognizing our stress. In this day and age, we really tend to glorify being busy. You can ask anyone how they're doing and their standard response is good, but busy. I know I'm guilty of that, saying that myself. Kind of almost become this badge of honor, like who can be the busiest, right? But in this being busy and keeping ourselves busy from the time we wake up until the time our heads hit the pillow, we've kind of lost the ability to really gauge our levels of stress because exhaustion, cranky moods, lack of sleep, brain fog, being distracted, it's really just become part of our everyday life. And some of us may not even really remember what it feels like to just feel good. So we really need to be honest with ourselves and check in with ourselves and see where our stress levels are at. Are they manageable? Do we need to start, doing something about those stress levels so that you can really watch for those indications of rising levels. Really take time to kind of check in with yourself and figure out how stress shows up for you. To me, I tend to get even busier. It's like I become manic to stay busy so I don't feel that stress or that overwhelm. And it's going to be different for everybody. Some people just shut down when they get overwhelmed. So really be honest with yourself and figure out how it shows up, what it looks like for you, so that you can kind of pay attention to that. So it's really important to be self-aware, because you can't help others if you're not really fully aware of how stress might be affecting your own self. And there are some great tools you can use if you're not super good at being self-aware yet, or not really sure how it shows up because you're just living in the stress state all the time. There's some resources in this handout that you will have, and there's some stress quizzes. I really like this because, again, it helps you become more self-aware of where you're at, and you can use these for the individuals or their families that you serve. You can do them together during a meeting. You could send it ahead of time and just use it as a conversation. I do want to stress, though, when you're using these for yourself or for the individuals or families that you serve, it is just a tool. You're not making a diagnosis because that is outside our scope of practice. It's just there to help you identify resources that may be needed to reduce stress. Again, not a diagnostic tool, just a conversation starter for yourself and for others. So we know we have stress, and actually go ahead and if you can chat in the comment box, write down on a scale of 1 to 10 where you think your stress levels are at. 1 being like you don't have a single care in the world, and 10 being like you're one more thing away from being totally overwhelmed. So 10 is the highest, 1 is the lowest. So write down where you think you're at, and then take one of those stress quizzes and see if you guessed right. So we know we have stress, right? Let's talk about how we can start to reduce or manage that stress. And really the biggest key in reducing stress is acknowledging that you have stress, right? Being aware that it's there and it is something that we have to manage. Some of our stress is well within our ability to manage. Some are not. Some of it you just have to kind of get through. And whether it's something you can change or not, there are steps we can take to help manage our stress. And the first one is getting active. Physical activity makes our list over and over and over again because it works, you guys. You don't have to work out an hour every day. You don't have to go run 5 miles. You don't have to become an Olympic bodybuilder. Virtually any form of physical activity is going to act as a stress reliever. Exercise floods our body with feel-good endorphins. It reduces the level of adrenaline and cortisol in our body. So it reduces those levels, those hormones that are released during the fight or flight response. It helps refocus our mind and give our brain a break. Sometimes just stepping outside of what we are doing can really help refocus our brain. And it gives protective qualities to the heart and lung. Remember, those are really affected during high stress or long-term stress. So this also gives it some protective quality. And then if you're looking for a vanity reason to work out, sedentary people had a significant decrease in their telomere length, which means sedentary people who don't work out as much, age quicker. So exercise keeps you looking younger. All right, decrease your caffeine intake here. Don't shoot the messenger. I love my coffee, and I wish I was drinking some right now because I'm sitting in front of my window and I'm freezing. So if you hear my voice shaking, it's because I'm literally freezing in front of my window. But caffeine might be doing more harm than good here. Caffeine alters the hormones in our body. It decreases our adenosine, which is a feel-good hormone in our body. It increases our adrenaline and cortisol, effectively mimicking that fight or flight response. It increases our dopamine, which again makes us feel good for a while, but then we crash and then we're reaching for that afternoon coffee or caffeine to give us that little boost again. And then it decreases our quality and quantity of sleep. So we don't have to give up completely on our caffeine habit, but there are some things we can do to decrease the effects that it has on our hormones. So when we wake up, our cortisol levels start to rise immediately. And if you're someone who, like me in the past, the first thing I would do is have coffee. Literally, my feet would hit the floor and I'd walk over to my coffee maker and start it. So what we're doing is we're causing those cortisol levels to spike way high and then drop and then spike. So that's what we don't want. So before you have your coffee or your caffeine in the morning, try to drink at least 8 ounces of water, or better, wait until you have something to eat and then have your coffee. That way our cortisol levels stay pretty level throughout the day and we're not having these peaks and valleys. Another thing, we need to limit our intake. So we shouldn't be drinking caffeine from the time we wake up until the time we go to bed. That's way too much. You want about 2 servings of caffeine a day. I won't say that I stick to that very often, but that's the goal. And then lastly, you want to stop your caffeine consumption about 8 hours before you go to bed. It can take up to 8 hours for caffeine to fully get out of your system so that it doesn't disrupt your sleep. So if you go to bed at 10 o'clock, you should not have caffeine after 2 o'clock. My rule is I try not to have coffee in the afternoon. Again, that doesn't always happen, but we can all have goals, right? So decrease your caffeine consumption and you'll feel a little bit better. All right, connect with others. I don't know about you guys, but this can sometimes feel counterproductive, especially if you've got a full schedule and adding something else can just feel like more overwhelming than helpful. But studies show that social contact is a really good stress reliever because it offers distraction, it provides support, and helps you feel less isolated. And isolation leads to higher risk of depression. So staying connected. And chances are that your friends are going to really understand what you're going through, be able to offer a listening ear, and probably make you laugh, which we know from our company event is a form of medicine in itself. And really try, social media is a great way to stay connected, but really try to connect face to face with your friends. There is nothing that can beat that face-to-face interaction and being with people in person. I think we all kind of learned that lesson during the pandemic, that there is nothing like being together with people. So, friendships are hard to maintain as we get older. So really foster those friendships and remember that it is a two-way street. You have to be reaching out as well as people reaching out to you. So stay connected with others. And sleep, you guys. This should probably have been at the top of the list, because if there's one thing that you can do for yourself when you are stressed or overwhelmed, it is getting good quality sleep. I know we can all relate to a time where we did not sleep or we were not sleeping well for a long period of time. Lack of sleep just makes everything feel worse. Minor inconveniences feel like major catastrophes. When you are sleep deprived, your emotions are heightened and your body actually reacts as if it's in distress when it doesn't get enough sleep, and it releases more cortisol into your system. So again, it's scientifically proven to make you feel worse when you don't get enough sleep. We want to aim for about 7 to 8 hours of sleep, more when you are stressed. Your body is again fighting those chemicals every day. It just needs more sleep. 42% of adults report poor to fair sleep. 43% report stress keeps them up at night. So you can see how that's kind of a chicken or an egg situation. And then stress increases when length and quality of sleep decreases. 21% surveyed felt more stressed when they didn't get enough sleep. And those with higher levels of stress, that 8, 9, 10 on a scale, fared even worse. 45% of those felt more stressed. And I'm going to say not even just sleep, but giving yourself time to rest during the day is also incredibly important. Again, we tend to get caught in this busy hamster wheel where we're just kind of running with chickens with our heads cut off. So really trying to give yourself downtime during the day. And maybe that's taking just a little bit longer lunch break where you can sit and just do nothing for 10 minutes. That doesn't come easy for me, but it has really made a difference when I do allow myself some downtime during the day. Not always possible, but really try to do that, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed. Again, some of us tend to ramp up that busyness. Try to scale back and do less and give yourself some time to just kind of recoup during the day. And then meditation and deep breathing. I know a lot of people feel like meditation is kind of hokey, but It truly does help. It actually reprograms the brain to the extent that those that meditated ended up with more capacity to manage stress. It's been scientifically proven to alleviate stress. And I'm going to say this about all of them, but none of these are going to eliminate your stress. It's, again, just helping you manage that stress. And I'm going to talk about deep breathing a little bit later, but deep breathing truly does kick your body out of that fight or flight response. And I'll talk about why later, but it will take you out of that fight or flight response and let your body calm down. So deep breathing and meditating truly do help. And then setting priorities and asking for help. I read this quote, I think it's in the book Essentialism, I can't remember, which is why I didn't quote it because I was too lazy to actually look it up. But when everything feels like a priority, nothing is. I am a recovering list maker. I'm a paper planner person, and every one of my boxes on my paper planner would be full, and the last line would say see other list, and I would have a whole other notebook of tasks I needed to complete during the day. So nothing was a priority. I was trying to do it all. And I do encourage you to write it down, but then go back through and categorize things as urgent, important, and non-important. And those non-important things, take them off your list until you have more time, or delete them altogether, or better yet, delegate and ask for help on that stuff. We would all like to believe that we are superhuman and can get it all done, but nobody can. There's no shame in asking for help. Actually, it's a sign of strength, knowing your limits and asking for help and delegating those tasks that you can put off to somebody else. And then last thing I want to say is just when you say yes to something, recognize that you are saying no to something else. That might be time with your family. That might be time for yourself. It might just be your own peace of mind. And while I know we can't say no to everything at work, but just know, even in work and outside of work, know what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to. If you're somebody who immediately says yes to everything, put this on a Post-it note beside your computer and remind yourself and ask yourself, if you say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And it's going to change your perspective. It used to be on my computer too, because I used to say yes to everything because I like to make people happy. So, and then finally, ask for help. Again, there is no shame in asking for help. IPMG has an employee assistance program that does offer a limited number of free counseling sessions. So if you do not know where else to start, that is a good place to start. You can contact Human Resources for more information on that. But just talking to a professional, I mean, it can just be, they're just somebody there that can listen, that doesn't have any skin in the game. They can be a listening ear. They can provide more resources for you and provide help that you might not get. There are some levels of stress that no amount of sleep or exercise is going to help you manage. So again, ask for that help if you need it. Helping others. Whether you are helping a friend, a coworker, one of the individuals you're working with, the first is helping them understand their stress level. They might find it tough to come to terms with what they're going through, or ignore or deny their feelings. Because again, when you're in the thick of it, sometimes you don't even realize how stressed you are, especially if it's something that's been going on for long term, which is really important, why you need to ask, listen, and observe. We want to ask questions not just to the individuals we serve, but to their caregivers and staff as well. We need to observe during interactions and how they're responding. Has their overall demeanor changed? Are they short-tempered? How much assistance do they have? How much sleep are they getting? You guys, that is a very important question. If people's sleep are disrupted, again, they are not going to be themselves. You might see behaviors increase, things like that. So again, asking how much sleep they're getting. Is it more or less? Have they had any major life changes, moves, changes in schools, job status change, roommate status changing, maybe a change in staff? All of that can add stress to our individuals and their families as well. And we really want to listen. We're all in the business of helping, and it can be really tempting to jump in and give advice to somebody who's struggling. But the best thing that we can do is just listen to the person in front of you. And you can just do that by listening and being empathetic with the individual And that in itself can just be a huge stress reliever for some people. And we really want to listen to hear and not to respond. We can get very caught up in what our response is going to be to what that person is saying in front of us. But when we do that, we take ourselves out of listening and we're not paying attention anymore. So we really want to just listen to hear and not respond. And we also really want to avoid making it about ourselves. Again, it can be tempting to want to offer a little anecdote to let them know that we can relate to what they're going through because of what we've experienced. But again, we're then making it about ourselves. We want to keep it about them. And if listening is all that you need, or listening is all that they need, then your job is done, right? But if they do want some help, you're in a better position to offer some solutions because you've really listened and now have a solid understanding of what they need or what they might need. And if they don't ask for advice, you can always ask them if they would be open to hearing suggestions or options. And I love this. I love the phrasing of that, would you be open to? Because it gives the option to say no. Not everyone wants their problem solved. Not everyone is ready for change. So it gives them the opportunity to say, no, I just wanted to vent. I know we've all been in that situation where we're venting and the person that we're talking to is trying to offer all of these suggestions. You're like, I just wanted to vent. So again, it puts it back on them and lets them say no, or yeah, that would be great. And then when we are listening, we just want to say empathetic things like, let me know how I can be of support, or this must be really hard. We want to avoid saying things like, just relax, or you'll be fine, or it'll all work out. That can really make someone feel very invalidated and misunderstood and make them feel even more stressed because they're like, I just poured my heart out and this person just responded saying, it'll all work out, don't worry. That is actually a giant pet peeve of mine. So take those words out of your vocabulary. I know it comes from a good place. You want to offer reassurance, but it can often come off as very dismissive. If they do want some suggestions or want help solving the issue, we can go through these problem solving steps. And again, this is going to be on your handout, but we're going to first define the problem. If it seems unmanageable, we can help them break it down into smaller parts so that it feels less overwhelming. We want to set goals. What is the outcome that will know that this problem is solved, right? What is the goal for solving this problem? We want to brainstorm possible solutions, and we're writing down anything and everything here. There's no judgment. As wild and crazy as ideas as you can come up with, as much as they can come up with, you're writing it all down. And then we're going to go back and rule out some of the wild and crazy options that probably aren't feasible. Then we're going to go over our pros and cons of each solution. And then we're going to make a decision. There might be one obvious solution, or there might be a couple that you can piece together that's going to get you to your end goal. We're going to put the solution into practice. We're going to implement, and we're going to give it time to work. Ideally 6 to 8 weeks. We can't give it 2 days and just kind of throw it out because it's not working. We really need to give it time to work. And then we're going to go back and evaluate. How is it working? Are there adjustments that need to be made? Did other issues come up in solving for this problem that we now need to look at? And maybe despite your best efforts, you're not able to fix the problem. You've tried different strategies, different solutions, and nothing seems to be working. So you might just have to go back and focus on coping skills and teaching those and talking with ways that they can help and helping them figure out what those coping strategies look like. And that really leads us right into stress resilience. I'm a quote person. We've got another one. When we are no longer able to change our situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. And that's really what stress resilience is. Resiliency is the ability to cope when something goes wrong, or your ability to bounce back. People who are resilient tend to have some common traits. They tend to be more positive. They tend to be more open. They see things as challenges and not obstacles. They're good at problem solving. They're good at asking for help, and they typically have a can-do attitude. Whereas those who are a little less resilient tend to be the opposite. They tend to struggle under pressure. They experience symptoms of anxiety or depression. They see things as obstacles that can't be overcome. They tend to resist change. They often feel deflated or hopeless, and more pessimistic in nature. So you don't have to write this in the comment box, but I want you to think about where you fall on this scale. Are you more resilient or less resilient? Or maybe somewhere in the middle. There's no right or wrong. It's just where we're at today. So we can think of it like this. Resiliency reduces the intensity of the stressor, while reduction provides coping mechanisms. Both are really important and often work in tandem. And because I'm a nurse and I think through things as health analogies, you can think of stress management as seeing your physician and taking medications after you've been diagnosed with an illness, right? Stress resilience is building up the healthy habits to kind of keep away from the illness or reduce the impact of the illness. So we need both, and they're going to work together, and one isn't necessarily better than the other. We really do need both of them. So we can't stress less or avoid stress altogether because it is just part of our life. But we really have to learn to live with stress and still live the life we want and not let that overwhelm consume us. And to do that, we have to build up our resilience to stress and learn to bounce back from that adversity. The good news is it's really never too late to start to build up our resilience. We can do that by learning to break down our problems into manageable tasks, like we just talked about, focusing on the positive, practicing gratitude, making yourself a priority, knowing your limits, through our social connection, becoming more mindful and present, being realistic, being flexible, and being curious. And being curious is really, I had a friend share this with me, and I'll share it with you guys. And it's really being able to look at the situation, whatever it is you're going through, and asking yourself, what is this trying to teach me? Now, when you're in the thick of it, when you feel like you are so overwhelmed, is probably not the time that you're going to be able to reflect back on that or reflect on that. But when you start coming out to the other side, it's really important to kind of look back and think about, what did that teach me? How am I better because of this? And again, it's going to take practice. It's not always the easiest thing to do, but getting curious about the situation can really help you build resilience. And then the last, one of the biggest indicators of resilience is pursuing purpose in life instead of chasing happiness. And I'm not going to talk about each one of these for the sake of time, but I'm going to talk just a few minutes about a few of these because they really did keep coming up in the research. And the first one is making yourself a priority. This means eating well, being compassionate with yourself, just giving yourself grace. We're all going to make mistakes, so giving yourself grace through those times. Doing things just for yourself because it brings you joy and for no other reason, and finding things that bring you joy. As we get older, we tend to stop doing a lot of the things that bring us joy because, again, we're so caught up in this hamster wheel of tasks and things we have to get done. Exercising because it's important for our health and stress management, and because it keeps us looking young. And it's just really doing the everyday things that keep us healthy mentally and physically. Social connection, talked about that. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but again, it's just keeping those friends close. I think I read most people have like a wider circle of like 10 to 12 people and only like 2 to 3 like really close friends. So if you're like me and you don't have like a ton of people, but I definitely have that core group of friends. So keep those friendships alive and really work hard to keep those connections. Mindfulness, we are going to talk a little bit more about that. I want you to stop and think about how many times, and I'm going to shorten this time frame because it said in the last week, how many times in the last few days can you say that you have fully been focused on what you are doing and where you're at? I'm going to guess even during this presentation, we probably haven't been the most present. No judgment, I do it too, but we're answering emails, we're sending text messages. We're very rarely fully present in the moment. And that's what mindfulness teaches us. It teaches us to be present in the here and now. It stops our thoughts from time traveling. So we're not thinking about what happened in the past. We're not worrying about what might happen in the future. We keep ourselves here in the present. And breathing exercises really help you stay present. So breathing is something we do automatically. I don't know how many times a day, but we don't sit and think like breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, right? Our brain is doing it for us. So bringing our awareness to our breath can really ground you and get you focused on the present. And again, I was going to run through these, but we're kind of running a little short on time. Again, these are going to be on your handout, but 360 breath is kicking us out of that fight or flight response. So I talked earlier about when we're stressed and we hold tension, we tend to get in that shallow breathing pattern, using the muscles of our upper body to kind of pull that breath in. That 360 breath is really forcing that air down into your ribs and back and expanding those ribs in the front, side, and back. It can be a challenge to do, especially if you have been in that shallow breathing pattern for a long time. But again, it kicks us out of that fight or flight. So we have a vagus nerve that runs from our throat down into our abdomen. And that diaphragm, when it contracts down on that deep breath, stimulates that vagus nerve, which stimulates our parasympathetic system, say that 10 times fast. So it truly does kick us out of that fight or flight response and starts that rest and digest system. So it floods our body with chemicals that help calm our body down. And then these other two are just different breathing techniques. I really like the uneven breathing. So you can inhale for a count of 4, hold your breath for a second, and then exhale for a count of 8. You can even reverse that and inhale for a count of 8 and exhale for a count of 4. Or box breathing. So you would inhale for a count of 4, you hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4, hold your breath for 4, and then you just keep repeating that. Whichever one you choose, 6 to 8 breathing cycles will really kind of kick yourself into that parasympathetic response. But when you're doing it, you have to slow down. You have to be seated or standing or laying down, really focusing on that breath. But you can do those when you feel your stress levels rising. You can feel that blood pressure rising. Maybe you're driving in the car, you're dealing with cranky kids, you're about to give a presentation. While Lana was talking, I was practicing my breathing, trying to get my body to calm down. You can even do these before you get out of bed in the morning, just to get yourself in that present state. So just a good resource to practice bringing yourself back into the present. And then finally, we're going to talk about finding your purpose. Again, this was one of the biggest indicators of resilient people. They knew their purpose and pursued it. And one of the ways to do this is to know your values and try to live by them. We create a lot of stress and imbalance in our lives when we're not aligned with our values. And if you have no idea where to start, you can take one of the online quizzes. Again, this is linked in your handout. And both of them are value card sorts. One's an online thing and one's you can print out the cards and do it on a table or wherever. And you guys, this was fascinating. I did this in a presentation or a conference that I went to a couple months ago, and it was really interesting to find out what my top 5 values were. One of them was not anything that I thought it would be. So if you have never done this before, I highly recommend you do it. And then in the handout, there's a little guide that will walk you through these next steps. But once you get your 5 values, then you're going to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being most or not fulfilled, 10 being the most fulfilled. And then you're going to rank those. You're going to think about when you feel most fulfilled in that value, and then what keeps your number from being higher, and then what would it take to increase your number by 1 to 2. So if you're at a 5 on one of your values, you're not going to think about how to jump to a 10. We want small steps to start working our way up. And just going to give you an example so this will make sense if you do choose to do it. So family was a core value for me. When I assessed it, I rated it as a 7. I said I felt most fulfilled when we were together as a family, having fun. We were all present. I said what kept me from being a higher number was feeling like I was always pulled in a million different directions. Kids in sports were all going in different directions. So one of my ideas was that every night from dinner to bedtime would be family time. So we would play a game, we would do something together as a family. And then one day during the weekend, we would spend time as a family together doing something. And then we would implement that, and then you would go back and evaluate that. So you would do that for each one of your values. Again, I found it very eye-opening and found different ways to increase my values. Another thing you can do are these journal exercises. And again, all of these prompts are in your handout. This is from the acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's journaling what your ideal life even looks like. So again, we spend our time so busy that we've kind of forgot how to daydream or let ourselves imagine what life could possibly look like. So you'll journal about how you want to spend the rest of your life. What does that even look like? And then some prompts you can use are, what do you want to continue doing? What do you want to start doing? What do you want to stop doing? What's not working? And what's standing in your way to getting that life that you want? And another practice is writing your own eulogy. I haven't done this, but everybody that said they did it said it was like life-changing for them. So, and this is just kind of journaling how you want to be remembered. What do you want people to say about you when you're gone? And what do you want to have accomplished in your life? So really give yourself time and space to identify ways to start moving in this direction. Pursuing your purpose most likely means you're going to have to make a change in behavior. And that doesn't mean you have to make big, drastic, sweeping changes immediately. Slow and steady changes are going to be the most successful. Remember, when we're doing our values, we're trying to move 1 point ahead. We're not trying to jump 5 points ahead. Slow and steady changes are going to be the ones that tend to stick. So in summary, stress isn't just in our head. Its effects can be felt in our brains, bodies, down to our cellular level. Stress is a serious risk factor for both our mental and physical health, but it is something we have to learn to live with, which we can do in a healthy way by practicing our stress reduction and building our stress resilience. And I had a fun little video, but it wasn't working to transfer to YouTube. So I'm going to leave you with that. You need to work on your coping skills and build your resilience so that you can weather the storms that will inevitably come. So I think we do have a few minutes for questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it back to Lana.
Thank you so much, Laura. This was excellent information, and I think that we can all take some of these ideas and apply them to our lives, and hopefully be able to manage and reduce the stress that I know that we all feel from time to time or ongoing. We did have a question, and someone had asked what would be considered a serving of caffeine. So I actually did share that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration considers 400 milligrams, which is about 4 cups of coffee, a safe amount. That, of course, probably is individualized to your own self, and you would probably know your own body. And then I did also include a link that you can see. It's in the questions section. It's also from the Food and Drug Administration, how much caffeine is in different types of things. So coffee, for me, it's Diet Coke. So you can kind of take a look. It's my Diet Coke.
We'll have a discussion about how bad Diet Coke is for you, Lana, later.
I know. I'm working on it, small steps. So
one thing about caffeine.
Go ahead, Laura. Nope. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing about caffeine is, we can become addicted to caffeine. So if you do, or if you are somebody who drinks a lot of it during the day, try to start just reducing it by 1 serving. Like if you have 4 Diet Cokes a day, scale it back to 3, and slowly just scale it back to maybe 2 a day. Whatever feels reasonable to you. I can have 3 cups of coffee and be bouncing off the walls. So follow the guidelines. But again, if you really want to cut back, just slowly start to cut back a little bit. Yeah. I like my coffee.
Good advice. Yeah. Well, and I know when I have, said, okay, I'm just going to quit it cold turkey, my Diet Coke habit, I just feel horrible. And so then I stopped. So reducing it by 1 a day and then kind of working towards that, I think, is a very good plan. Don't just say, I'm going to stop, and then, you feel bad. Because caffeine does affect you. I mean, as you explained.
It does. So, it absolutely does.
So someone has mentioned about the handouts that Laura has mentioned. And if you are an IPMG employee, then we will put those in the announcements. We'll do an announcement and we can attach them, or if they're a link. But if you are not an IPMG employee, they will be included in on our website. Again, you can go to our website, www.gotoipmg.com, go to the resources section at the top, and then there will be an area that says informational webinars. If you click on that, you can see an archive of all of our informational webinars. This one will be included, and it will include that handout that you can then either print out or save on your computer. So, but again, with the upcoming holiday, Thanksgiving holiday, that might be delayed a little bit getting on our website, but it will be there. So if it's not there when you check, please check back. And let's see if there are some shout outs, Laura, of how great this presentation was, and the appreciation for that. And I second that as well.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak with you today.
I am not seeing any other questions. So with that, we will close out. Just again, a couple quick reminders that as soon as I end today's webinar, there will be a survey that pops up. We would appreciate you taking just a few minutes to fill that out. Helps us with our planning for upcoming webinars. Also, if you attended today using the link you received when you registered, you will receive a follow-up email that will contain a certificate of attendance as well as a link to the survey. If you don't want to do it as soon as we're finished, that will be available to you. And I did just want to mention that our next informational webinar, which will be in 2023, will be on February the 17th. Again, those will be at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And as we get a little bit closer to that date, we will share the topic and the information as well as the registration link. So be looking for that to come soon, but that will be on February the 17th. We will not have one in December or January. So again, thank you everybody for attending. Laura, thank you so much for the presentation and information. I wish you all a wonderful holiday season and a very happy 2023. And we will see you all in the new year. Thank you very much and have a great day.